Do you mind if I smoke?
It won't affect the test.
Ridley Scott is one of the industry's more polarizing directors to me. I can never tell if he's actually good at what he does, since for every Alien there's a House of Gucci, and for every Thelma and Louise there's a Napoleon. But over the last few years, my favourite work of his has been 1982's Blade Runner. Now, while maybe not as objectively perfect as Alien, there's something about Blade Runner that just sticks with me, and brings a smile to my face when I think about it. It works as a straight-up detective story, but on further inspection provides far more subtextual insight than you'd imagine. The story is a commentary on society, class, pollution, wealth, and humanity as a whole. If you haven't seen the film, then please be aware that this video has some pretty major spoilers, but otherwise, sit back, relax, and listen to me ramble on about why I love Blade Runner. The film is set in the dystopian Los Angeles of 2019 and features a world so vivid and expansive that it went on to inspire a whole bunch of other media in the decades that followed. The cyberpunk aesthetic of Blade Runner has been addressed, mimicked, and expanded upon through other movies, TV shows, comic books, video games, and more. You could argue that without this movie, we wouldn't have a Matrix or a Cyberpunk 2077. There's just something about the way that this world is put together that lures people in and makes them want to learn more about it. I think its appeal spans beyond its visual stylings though, and a good chunk of its intrigue actually comes from what this world means for the people living in it. Where the setting of Blade Runner differs from something like Star Trek is that the technology available isn't really glorified. The idea of tech is bad isn't exactly unique, but instead of everything being clean, sleek, and glossy, things are actually rather bleak and depressing. This isn't a world where AI is advancing too quickly and trying to take over, it's about how the super sophisticated technology only really benefits the wealthy, while the poor are left to fend for themselves in squalor. It's high-tech, low life. This is not a paradise for the people of LA, since most of the rich have travelled off-world, and the few that remained live high up in penthouses overlooking the city. The ground level is more reminiscent of a slum, overcrowded by the poor and working class. The societal ladder is reflected quite literally here. The higher up you are in the chain, the higher up you live, hence why people like Tyrell are based in skyscrapers, and the average population are relegated to busy streets and eating at food vendors. The whole ambiance of this world is dark and depressing. We only ever seem to see it at night and in the pouring rain, a tactic that Seven went on to use a little over a decade later, and this permeates the story in a thick, overbearing sense of repression. All of the advancements in technology serve to create a workforce that would benefit those already in power, while the current workers lost out on jobs and income. It's hardly coincidental that the rich all seem to be middle-aged Caucasians, while the population living in poverty below seem to be a blend of various European and Asian cultures. The language spoken is a combination of Japanese, Spanish, German, and various others, showcasing how everyone but the elite have all been lumped into one place and forced to live together. The planet has been reduced to such a bad state that the majority of wildlife has died off, resulting in the animals we see being artificial in nature. Tyrell's owl and Zora's snake are both fake because the genuine things are so rare that they'd cost a fortune to attain. This is the result of technology in this world.
Is this a real snake?
Of course it's not real. Think I'd be working in a place like this if I could afford a real snake?
The main plot of the film follows the cat-and-mouse chase between the artificial android-like machines known as Replicants and the special police department sent to hunt them down, known as Blade Runners. Rick Deckard is the officer sent to track down and terminate a group of replicants on the loose in Los Angeles by using his skills as a detective to get the job done. Replicants are seen as lesser than humanity based purely on the fact that they are artificial in nature, but the idea that Blade Runner explores is how we've inherently switched places with them when it comes to morals, ideologies, and even basic empathy. Supposedly, this is the basis of the Voight-Kampff test that the police use to interrogate suspected replicants. It's a series of hypothetical scenarios designed to invoke an involuntary non-verbal response, which is then used to separate the empathetic humans to the emotionless machines. But where this becomes kind of ironic is in how the replicants start to show more signs of humanity than the actual humans. The Nexus 6 models were developed with a 4-year lifespan as a failsafe because of their developing unstable emotions. The replicants in the film that Deckard is tasked with hunting down are on Earth illegally, since a recent mutiny outlawed their presence on the planet. This is why he sent after them in the first place, but as time goes on, it seems that humanity becomes obsessed with terminating them for reasons they don't even remember anymore. It's just automatic. The humans constantly try to justify their actions by insisting that the replicants are just machines, even calling their execution a retirement, despite the fact that, for them, it is death. From the very beginning, the replicants are framed as the antagonists. We're told that they're dangerous, on Earth illegally, and have killed 23 people in an escape attempt. Now, all of this is true, but we're only getting half of the story, either because the humans have the media and control of the narrative, or because of their complete ignorance in the first place. The Nexus 6 models are victims of trauma, and their actions, while drastic, were a direct response to how they'd been treated their whole lives. Remember, they're a workforce. Roy is a commando, Leon's a manual labourer, Zora is an assassin, and Pris is described as a basic pleasure model. Now, imagine in your mind being 100% human and forced into slavery to do jobs that other people don't want to, including sex work. Through that lens, it's hardly surprising that they did what they did, and if people knew the truth, there'd likely be more sympathy for their cause. The replicants don't have any world-dominating goals or sinister intent, they just want to be left alone to continue as real people. Leon started working as a waste disposal engineer and Zora as an exotic dancer. They simply want to live. Their long-term ambition is to find a way to extend their life, because who wouldn't? If you discovered you had months left to live and you had an opportunity to literally meet your maker and possibly earn yourself more time, you'd probably do it. But it's Roy Batty that leads this ragtag group in their quest to find Tyrell. Roy's entire character seems infatuated with the idea of time and getting more of it. His first line in the film is
Time.
and his last is
Time to die.
he simply loves life too much to want it to end, so goes to extreme measures in his quest for more. In the climax of the film, Deckard retires Pris, and upon finding her body, Roy breaks down into tears. Not only is he grieving the loss of life and the loss of a friend, but now he understands that he's truly alone. He's the last of the Nexus 6 models and is running out of time himself. In an act of rage, he stalks Deckard and breaks his fingers as revenge for Pris's murder. He clearly feels all of the emotions that humanity would try to claim he doesn't, from sadness and regrets, all the way to anger and jealousy. At the end of their conflict, Deckard misses a jump and finds himself hanging from the roof of a building, only for Roy to pull him to safety. I think you can tell that Deckard is surprised and obviously confused as to why he does this, but by the end of the scene, he understands perfectly. Given that he only had minutes left to live, Roy chose to spend what was left of it feeling truly alive. He sings, he howls at the moon, impales his hand on a nail to feel something, and stands outside to feel the rain on his skin. At this point, he's lost everyone else, but doesn't want to lose himself, so chooses to make his final act one of kindness and mercy. He gives Deckard a chance to go on because he cherishes life. All life. He spends his final moments reflecting on the things he feels he'd been privileged enough to witness.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Early on in the film, Deckard meets Rachel and performs the Voight-Kampff test on her to show Tyrell what a negative result looks like. However, he's a little disturbed to learn that not only is she a replicant, but took far longer than usual to identify because she's had false memories planted inside her. She thinks she's a human. Now, what I think makes this interesting is that it brings a whole new question to the table. Are a person's emotions any less valid because they're inspired by someone else's experiences? If you'd argue yes, because they didn't go through those things themselves, then that just begs the question, what's the point of art at all? Fake memories can still instill real emotions, so even though you didn't personally go on the journey that the protagonist did in that film you watched, you were still able to take something away from it. Learn a lesson, ponder some themes, or even just feel something. With this in mind, despite her memories actually being that of Tyrell's niece, Rachel's thoughts and feelings aren't any less genuine. She still has that element of humanity that the humans think she doesn't. A soul, if you believe in that sort of thing. Conversely, LAPD's almost autonomous methods of retiring replicants is bordering on robotic. The argument can be made that routine will inevitably have you running like clockwork, making the actual people less human than the machines they build. But if you talk to anyone about Blade Runner, even if they haven't seen it, they're likely to bring up the age-old question, is Deckard a replicant? It's kind of become the talking point of the film, and there's something to suggest both that he is and he isn't. The arguments for him being human usually relate to the fact that he simply isn't as fast nor as strong as the others, plus he clearly has a longer lifespan than 4 years since he had to come out of retirement from a long career to hunt down the Nexus 6 models. Evidence for him being a replicant typically revolves around the reflection in his eyes that only the replicants are shown to have, the dream of a unicorn, which Gaff seems to know about, and the fact that Ridley Scott himself has come out and said that he is. But what I appreciate is that despite his personal interpretation, he doesn't commit to a specific answer in the film. Even the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, is faithful enough to the original that it doesn't explore this question any further. Personally, I side with the idea that Deckard is 100% human. After all, the film's purpose was to blur the lines between man and machine. From my interpretation, the story is about how it took a replicant to remind Deckard of what it means to be human. He was so caught up in finishing the job and doing his duty that he never even considered what he was doing to be murder. He needed a replicant to bring him back down to Earth and remember what's important. If he were a replicant, then the whole message of the film begins to fall apart. This is one of the reasons I drastically prefer the final cut of the film. In case you didn't know, there are at least 5 different versions of Blade Runner: the pre-release work print, the American theatrical release, the international theatrical release, the 1992 director's cut, and the 2007 final cut. Aside from editing choices, changes in the color correction, and remastered special effects, there are 2 main reasons I prefer the final cut. It removes the terrible Harrison Ford voiceover that spells everything out for you and removes a lot of the subtext and ambiguity, and it scraps the quote-unquote happy ending. In the theatrical cuts, the movie ends with Deckard and Rachel driving off into the mountains, and a narration stating that Tyrell mentioned how Rachel never had a built-in lifespan, meaning that the two will get to spend the rest of their lives together in happiness. With this scene removed, the film ends with Deckard escorting Rachel out of her apartment and finding the origami unicorn on the ground, clearly understanding a message left for him, and the elevator doors closing. This version not only adds more mystery as to the eventual fate of these 2 characters, but works better to cement its point. As far as he's aware, Rachel does have that 4-year expiry date and won't have a full life with him, but he's going with her anyway. He knows that they'll be hunted down by the police, but is willing to go along with it for however long he gets, because he loves her and she loves him. Sure, it's technically less optimistic of an ending, but far more satisfying from a thematic standpoint. Blade Runner remains one of the best sci-fi films out there, and the thematic resonance of the story is somehow more relevant today than it was back in 1982. It's definitely a film that everybody needs to see, not just for its status as a cult classic, but for how its message truly stands the test of time. In 2024, with AI getting more intelligent and its capabilities always expanding, we need stories like this to remind us of what's important. It might not be as action-packed as you were expecting. I've heard a lot of people say they think it's quite boring, but it's the subtext that makes it stand out from its contemporaries. Blade Runner isn't a film about gadgets or gizmos, it's an intelligent tale about humanity and what we strive for in life. Deckard goes on an emotional journey, and comes out of the story a changed man. He makes a choice that will affect his life drastically, for better or worse. He doesn't know how long they have, but he's learned to fight for what he loves, and if Roy Batty taught him anything, it's the value of life.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?